Hey all, quick video for you today, and bear with me as it's going to be a little bit rough as I am still packaging up the holiday weekend episode of the Roundup that's going to publish this Saturday. Anyways, the news today, Sony and Microsoft's arguments over whether or not Microsoft should be allowed to purchase Activision Blizzard have been published, at least the arguments being presented to the CMA. That's the Competition and Markets Authority. They're one of the big regulators that Microsoft does need to convince to make sure that the deal can go through, in its entirety. The arguments have been published that Sony and Microsoft have been making, and they are very entertaining. There is a ton of interesting poll quotes, but let's just start off with this article published on VGC by Andy Robinson, which reads, Sony claims Microsoft's true strategy is to make PlayStation like Nintendo. The company argues that Xbox will become the home of FPS games if its Activision deal is approved. Now, Sony specifically stated in their argument that Microsoft claims that Nintendo's differentiated model demonstrates that PlayStation doesn't need Call of Duty to compete effectively, but this reveals Microsoft's true strategy. Microsoft wants PlayStation to become like Nintendo so that it would be a less close and effective competitor to Xbox. The argument goes on, post-transaction, Xbox would become the one-stop shop for all the best-selling shooter franchises on console, i.e. Call of Duty, Halo, Gears of War, Doom, and Overwatch, and it would then be free from serious competitive pressure. And basically, Sony just goes on to argue that Call of Duty is absolutely critical to PlayStation as a business. The Sony argument explains, the franchise is firmly entrenched in gamers' psyche. Every installment since Call of Duty was first released back in 2003 has consistently topped the charts. The statement goes on, ignoring these facts, Microsoft argues that Nintendo has been successful without access to Call of Duty. This misses the point. The decision identifies a wide body of evidence showing that Nintendo offers a differentiated experience to Xbox and PlayStation because it is focused on family-friendly games that are very different from PEGI 18 first-person shooter games like Call of Duty. Then Sony pointed out that Microsoft's own internal documents, which are provided to the CMA, track PlayStation more closely than Nintendo, with Nintendo often being absent from any internal competitive assessment. It certainly is an interesting argument since Microsoft themselves have already said in the past that they don't view Nintendo or Sony actually as competitors, since their new competitors or who they think that they're competing against are companies like Google and Apple and Amazon, big companies who could just purchase sections of the game industry outright. So it seems like Microsoft in their strategy is trying to beat those larger companies to the punch there. Sony is onto something here, but they're very, very focused on Call of Duty specifically, as it is a billion-dollar franchise. And you can't really ignore that. You've got Microsoft here on the other side saying some pretty wild things as well. Jumping over to another summary of the arguments over on GamesIndustry.biz in an article written by Christopher Drink, we can see Microsoft is basically arguing that Call of Duty isn't really that special or unique at all. Specifically, they said, Call of Duty does not drive spend on PlayStation and accounts for only a redacted percent of Sony's digital revenues worldwide. In 2022, Call of Duty gamers spent essentially the same time on Xbox as FIFA, Fortnite, Grand Theft Auto, Minecraft, NBA 2K, and Rocket League gamers. Importantly, they also spent around the same proportion of time playing other franchises. This is inconsistent with Call of Duty having a greater ability to drive consumption of non-Call of Duty content on consoles than other popular franchises. Specifically, Dring pointed out that Microsoft does say that they view Nintendo as a competitor and even highlighted the recent release of Bayonetta 3 to counter the idea that Nintendo is a family-oriented business. Microsoft also reiterates its stance that Call of Duty isn't irreplaceable. Basically, it says that the next console generation isn't until 2028 at the earliest. We saw a report recently saying that, a new PlayStation or a PlayStation 6 wouldn't be coming out until sometime after 2027. And Microsoft added that Sony would have plenty of time to basically react. They said, if Sony were indeed worried about a hypothetical withholding of Activision content, the idea that Microsoft would make Call of Duty exclusive to Xbox platforms, it would have at the very least 6 years to prepare a competitive response in time for the launch of the next generation of console. Of course, Sony has refuted this idea in the past, saying that trying to come up with a competitor to Call of Duty is a near impossible task, as there have been other companies that have been trying for years, like EA. Specifically, they pointed out that as of August 2021, Battlefield has sold 88.7 million units compared to Call of Duty, which has sold over 400 million copies. There's also a really large disagreement over how subscription models are affecting the market or going to affect the market. Microsoft says developers and publishers view multi-game subscription services as just one monetization model for gaming content. Similarly, gamers see subscription services as one of the many ways in which gaming content is paid for. However, Sony disagrees. They basically said that if Xbox were to make Call of Duty exclusive to Game Pass, it could severely hurt the games industry overall, but specifically PlayStation. However, to counter, Microsoft says that PlayStation Plus is the biggest game subscription service, which has over double the number of Game Pass subscribers. But then Sony fires back, basically saying that, it doesn't really count one-to-one since Xbox Game Pass has more subscribers compared to the higher PlayStation Plus tiers. Sony also points to, other acquisitions by Microsoft and the history there where Microsoft can kind of just shut things down or capitalize on a particular market by these types of acquisitions. So they're pointing to that history as well. But Xbox, continues to double down, saying they have no plans of taking Call of Duty away from PlayStation. But, they're reluctant to give that in some kind of writing that says, indefinitely, forever, right? Phil Spencer said it would be silly to sign that contract. But there has been rumors about a 10-year agreement, at which point they would have to reconsider the terms of it. So it's certainly an interesting back and forth here. IGN reporter Rebecca Valentine pointed out an interesting aspect to the argument as well. On Twitter, she wrote, Microsoft arguing that, quote, actually Call of Duty is bad and no one likes it, unquote, is a pretty funny move in trying to get this acquisition through. She then screenshotted a picture of the, official written argument that's being reviewed by the CMA. It reads, Call of Duty is consistently outranked in user polls on PlayStation, e.g. Sony's annual Game of the Year poll has consistently named games other than Call of Duty as their Game of the Year or most anticipated game. Call of Duty is consistently outranked on Metacritic scores. Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War was ranked number 18 in 2020, number 126 in all-time scores, and Call of Duty Vanguard was ranked number 73 in 2021, number 159 in all-time scores. Then Call of Duty is consistently outranked in industry reviews of the top games, e.g. reviews published by IGN, USA Today, Business Insider, Game Rant, and others. Valentine also quote tweeted another response to a different thread on the same discourse. The tweet is from Dan Thiel, who wrote a comedic summarization of both sides' arguments, writing for the Sony side, if there's no Call of Duty on PlayStation, you might as well set your PS5 on fire. There's no point in even owning one. And then on Microsoft's side of the argument, nobody plays Call of Duty. I honestly don't even know why we bought it. And yeah, that's just a really good summarization of what's going on here. Both sides trying to exaggerate their argument to kind of win their victory, to, on Sony's case, trying to prevent Microsoft from acquiring Activision Blizzard, trying to prevent regulators from approving the acquisition, and then the Microsoft side trying to do whatever they can to convince regulators that this is all on the level. They don't have any plans to make Call of Duty exclusive or, harm the industry overall through corporate greed, basically, and just kind of agreeing to basically anything at this point and just reiterating how much they plan to keep Call of Duty on PlayStation consoles. But that's not good enough, right? If it's not in writing, PlayStation does have reason to be concerned. I just don't think they've been going about it the best possible way. But then on the other hand, Microsoft pretending like Call of Duty isn't a multi-billion-dollar franchise is kind of silly as well. So definitely let me know how you guys are feeling about this back and forth in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching, and for more video game news and updates, stay tuned to Inside Gaming.